All righty.
They're live.
Very good. If we could call the Rules Committee meeting to order. And Sarah, if we could please have a roll call.
Freeman.
Aye.
Fusco. Amobian.
Present.
Connor.
Here.
Hi.
Okay, all committee members are present.
Okay. And I would ask for approval from the minutes of the last meeting.
So moved.
Motion is second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. I believe our item for our old business, actually, we have that now as a substitute, and I'll read that in. This is an ordinance amending and or supplementing Title 3, Chapter 38, Unlawful Discrimination, Section 38-01, definitions of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Akron, and declaring an emergency. And this is a substitute offered as an amendment. And Ms. Samples, would you be speaking?
Just briefly, because I see that Brantley is with us today. The only substitution here is they added some language about the Crown legislation and their meaning behind it. That's the only thing that was added. So
Okay.
with that, I turn it back over to you.
Okay, Brant, would you like to address us, please?
Sure, I would love to. Thank you for having me and to speak to you. I'm here today representing the Akron Civil Rights Commission. I'm currently serving as its chair. Last Tuesday, the commission met, discussed this proposed ordinance, and voted unanimously to support passage of this legislation. I'm also here to the extent that I can be helpful. I have been teaching as a law professor at the University of Akron since 1997. And among the courses that I teach is employment discrimination law. So if there are particular questions about where this proposal fits in the scope of anti-discrimination law, I could talk about that as well. On the merits, I'll only say, and unless there are particular questions about particular aspects, this is a subject matter that's been well discussed by scholars for many years, and is now kind of hitting real life right around the country in different jurisdictions where the need to address this particular form of discrimination has been more broadly recognized. But as I say, I can answer specific questions if you like.
Very good. So at this time, I would open up the floor to any questions or comments, beginning with committee members, and then we'll move on to any other council members that might have questions or comments. And I am on a cell phone device, so I cannot see raised hands. So if you would please just speak, and we'll recognize you. Any council, any committee member, any council members, please? Okay.
Councilman Malik.
Say again?
Councilman Malik has his hand raised.
Okay, very good. And Sarah, again, I cannot see that, so you'll need to prompt me along here.
Will do.
Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I very much support this legislation, and think that it's well worth enacting. While we have you, Professor Lee, I was hoping that maybe you could kind of give us an overview over the committee's the commission's work in the last year, because I think there has been a lot of work that you all have gone through.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. We have adjusted, like everybody else, to online meetings when COVID hit. We have been holding our regular meetings throughout the short of a, we had a little bit of a delay at the beginning, but otherwise we've been meeting regularly. We have, the number of complaints has slowed down. We had, I believe, 19 complaints last year, and this year we have had so far 4 complaints. Of those 4 complaints, one of them is currently being investigated. And we have 1 complaint from last year that's being investigated. Otherwise, our complaints have all been resolved from the time that we started. Our updated annual report is actually on its way to the council this week. Other than the particular sort of response to complaints, I would note that the council is interested and engaged in sort of broadening our sort of educational responsibilities and our educational mandate. So we've begun to reach out to the school district, for instance, to see if there's a module on civil rights that we could develop to be presented in schools. We have been speaking on an ad hoc basis before different groups that want to know what the commission does. We are paying close attention to the activities of the council, and some of us are participating in different aspects of the activities of the council with regard to public safety and with regard to the racial equity and social justice groups that have been meeting. And we are interested and have offered to support those activities in any way that we can. We are eager to be a resource for the community with regard to some issues that have been particularly divisive in recent times, and where there sometimes seems to be a need for different authority, a different body that might be able to undertake activities that would be helpful. So please do think of us in that light. We are, other than a sort of a kind of a, there is a payment for us for each meeting that we attend, but we are, for the most part, for most of the work that we do, a volunteer commission with some staffing support, as you know, from the law department, but otherwise without a lot of resources directly under our control in order to be able to carry out activities. So that's an overview. If there is any other specific questions, I can answer them.
Sarah, do we see any other raised hands? Thank you, Brant.
I do not see any. Councilwoman Amobian, are you raising your hand?
Actually, no, but I do have a comment, a question actually. And this is for the professor. When you find that you are in, I don't know if you're investigating or learning about these cases or what have you, are people actually admitting that they're discriminating based on these circumstances? How do you arrive at that decision?
Is that a question about the Crown Act substance or more generally about our complaints?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, the Crown Act.
The cases that come up in federal court, and they have been coming up since fairly early on after the passage of the Civil Rights Act. They come up, the employer admits that, and they say outright, right, that they, and sometimes they specify that they are going to prohibit cornrows or they're going to prohibit braids. And sometimes it comes a little bit less directly where they say they will require professional appearance, right, in hairstyles. And then that gets enforced, right, against people wearing particular hairstyles. and not more generally.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about, because I kind of wonder if anybody would be so stupid or so obvious that they would admit that they were discriminating based on someone's hairstyle. But I do know it happens. It has happened for years. So thank you very much.
Okay, I don't see or hear from anyone else. We have had, I think this has been the third week. Okay, so I'm looking for a motion. I think,
So move.
okay, I have a motion and the motion is for suspension of the rules. Is that correct, Ms. Amobian?
Yes.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second from Mr. Malik. All those in favorable of suspension of the rules, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, very good. We will get this passed out this evening. And thank you to the sponsor, Ben. Thank you as well for your work. And I know from time to time probably seems thankless for all the hours that you folks put in, but we are grateful. Thank you very, very much. All right, we come to our next item. This is a resolution recognizing and congratulating Councilman Russ Neal on his recent election as the new president of the National Black Caucus of local elected officials and declaring an emergency. And Ms. Amobian, I will defer to you.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want people to recognize that this is a big deal. And I want to just let you know that if it were not for COVID-19, this city would have a major event this spring, summer, with over 200 and some Black elected officials from all over the country coming to our city to see the things that we brag about and talk about when we go to NLC events, and to acknowledge that Councilman Neal did not put his name in. He was actually drafted to be the leader. This is one of 5 constituency groups of NLC, and this is the largest one. It has more than 500 members, and it is a major event for our city to be recognized. And I just want people to appreciate the leadership role that Councilman Neal is going to be taking on for a year. And although things will be done virtually, there will be some events, but they would just be different. Otherwise, we would be all over the city transporting more than 200 people around and just showing off our city of Akron, which is what we have done for years when we have gone to different cities where the president will host members of NBC Leo. So I just want you to know that this is a major recognition for our city. And I thank Mr. Neal for taking this on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other comments, please, from either committee members or council members?
I don't
Okay.
see any hands raised.
Okay, please proceed.
I like to move that we approve this tonight and recognize Mr. Neal for this major honor. Thank you.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion, a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, we'll see that that item is passed out this evening. And I do not believe we have anything else to come before us, so we will adjourn.
We do have an
That's
item 2A, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I did not get that. I'm sorry.
No problem. Can I read that in for you?
Could you please? Thank you.
Yep. This is a resolution congratulating Donald C. Mullen, Executive Director of Stark State College, Akron, on his retirement and his many career achievements, wishing him well in all of his future endeavors and declaring an emergency.
Okay. Who's the sponsor on this?
That would be Councilwoman Samples.
Okay. Ms. Samples, I'd ask you to address us on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Freeman. This resolution is recognizing Don Mullen on his retirement after 10 years with Stark State. He has really helped move the envelope for Stark State Akron. And he is a Akron Public Schools graduate as well as a University of Akron graduate. I just want to wish Don well. He has done his community and his city proud, and I'm hoping that he has a great retirement. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can see that Councilman Malik has his hand raised.
Councilman Malik?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Ms. Samples. It definitely, echo her thoughts. I think sometimes take it for granted that the city is full of people of incredible kindness and incredible thoughtfulness and hard work. And that is something that all of those traits are present in Don Mullen, who's I think been a force for Stark State and for this community generally. So I know we all wish him well and definitely, support this ordinance.
Thank you.
And I just would like to say, Mr. Chair, I don't know if anybody else's hand was raised. It's okay for me to go ahead.
Please.
Okay. During the time that Mr. Mullen was at Stark State, he has been someone that we could reach out to and talk to about some of the initiatives. I know the city of Akron had played a major role in getting this college here. So it was nice to have someone there that one could reach out to. And I certainly thank him for his efforts.
Absolutely. Obviously, a legacy and a lot of work, and then a legacy of brick and mortar that we all enjoy seeing each and every day as well. So if there are no other comments, I would ask for a motion from one of our members to suspend the rules.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 All right, very good. We'll see that that's passed out this evening. And with that, at 3:03, we will adjourn. Thank you so much.
Our next committee of the day will be the Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Those committee members are Freeman, Amobian, Malik, Baylor, and Lombardo. And we can get started whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Okay, very good. We'll move right into Budget and Finance. I'd like to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. If we could please have a roll call.
Freeman,
Aye.
Amobian,
Aye.
Malik,
Aye.
Baylor,
Aye.
and Lombardo.
Aye.
All committee members are present.
All right, very good. We have nothing on our old agenda. We do have several items on our new agenda. The first item is an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of notes in a maximum principal of $2,500,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds to pay the costs of acquiring and installing computer equipment for the city, and acquiring, constructing, and equipping and otherwise improving the city's network infrastructure, including the acquisition of equipment and related software, in furtherance thereof, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Fricker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is one of 5 total pieces of bond issuances. This is our annual, what we call our various purpose bond issuance, and we will have a separate piece for each area of financing. This particular one is for our information technology systems upgrade. So this includes both our Workday project and some server upgrades that we are doing, and this is all part of a number of items that were in our 2020 capital budget.
Correct. Okay, questions or comments? Please help me out here, Sarah, if you see a hand raised.
I can see that Councilman Malik has his hand raised.
Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Fricker. As you mentioned, I think there are 5 pieces, and I think if my math is correct, and lawyers are famously bad at math, but it's, I think, a total of 12.4 million.
That is correct.
Bonds. Yeah.
Which
And
is
I
about
guess
the amount that we anticipated issuing this year. So we've been kind of right in that area of around $12 million. So that this is consistent with what we've been doing for the past several years.
I appreciate that. That is helpful. I guess one of the things that I was, concerned about as I was reading this is that, I know that over the summer our bond ratings were reduced by the rating agencies, and that one of the factors in that was the significant level of debt that we do have. And I know that that's, from a number of different kinds of capital projects over the years. But can you talk a little bit about our current outstanding debt level, and in light of that, in light of what I just said about the downgrade, sort of the thought process in this amount of
Correct.
bond?
So we have been, in recent years, we've been trying to limit this various purpose debt issuance to, somewhere between 10, 12, $13 million. So, at the current time, we are paying down more debt than we are issuing in our, what I would call our capital budget debt. So that is the debt that's primarily funded with our income tax revenue sources. So we have been, issuing less debt in recent years than we were, 10, 15 years ago. And therefore, we're retiring more debt than we are issuing annually. And this amount is something that we did talk about with the bond rating agency. So this is the amount that we informed them that we would be issuing in 2020.
Okay.
And that's what you had brought up, Mr. Fricker. We've stayed pretty consistent with that over the past 3 or 4 years.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, very good. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, I can see that Councilwoman Amobian has her hand raised.
Yes, Ms. Amobian?
Yes, I'm curious. This is both hardware and software, Mr. Fricker.
That is correct. So it's a combination of our Workday software and some, some network infrastructure upgrades, servers, a new firewall, some critical networking components that we've been looking to do. So it's a combination of hardware and software, as you said.
It's so hard to keep up with technology because things are moving so quickly. How long do we think this is going to last in terms of keeping up?
I think we've done the bulk of the major network improvements this year. We will still probably have a little bit next year to do, but it's my understanding from our IT department that the larger amount of the improvements that we've done were actually put in place this year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do you have any other? Mr. Fricker, what would be your pleasure in this?
On this one, we would ask for suspension of the rules.
Very good. So looking for a motion.
So move.
I can see that Councilman Malik has his hand raised.
Councilman Malik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess, Mr. Fricker, I guess given that this is, 5 pieces and a substantial amount of money, would we be okay taking a week's time on these and
we could do
passing
that
next
if
week?
necessary. Yes, we could do that if you so desired.
Okay.
So this is
Mr. Chair,
So
consent
consent
agenda?
then, yeah.
I move consent.
Okay.
Second.
Motion for consent. Before we vote, Steve, that's not going to put us up against the wall on anything?
Now we just need to issue before the end of the year.
Okay, very good. Okay, we have a motion and a second for consent. All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, very good. Opposed? Okay, very good. That item will be placed on a consent agenda. Next, we have an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of notes in a maximum principal amount of $650,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds to pay the costs of improving municipal buildings and facilities in the city by constructing, reconstructing, renovating, repairing roofs, remodeling, relocating, making site and other improvements, planning and designing facilities, and acquiring and installing related equipment, all as applicable, designed or to be designated by the Director of Public Service, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this goes along with the total $12.4 million issuance, and this is for various, and most of them are pretty small, municipal facility projects.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I can see that Councilwoman Amobian has her hand raised.
Yes, Ms. Amobian?
Yeah, my question is, do we have a list of items that and buildings and things that we want to do, Mr. Fricker?
We can provide a list of the projects that are involved with this. Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I guess I would just say, I think as similarly, I think I think that same question might apply to most of the other packages as well. So if we could get kind of a summary of the major expenses for each of those packages, that would be helpful. I think street repair is kind of self-explanatory, but other than that.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so would someone consider a motion for consent?
So move.
Second.
Motion a second for consent. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Right, very good. Place that item on the consent agenda. Next, we have an ordinance authoring the issuance and sale of notes in a maximum principal amount of $500,000 in anticipation of issuance of bonds to pay the costs of improving the municipal parks and recreational system in the city and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, part of the $12.4 million issuance, and this is for recreation and parks related projects.
Okay, and I'm just anticipating that probably if we could see what the different projects are that are attached with this.
Right.
Okay, very good. Questions or comments?
I would just, this is Omobian, Mr. Chair. Is it okay for me to go ahead?
Yes, yes, please.
I would just like to not only get the list, hopefully we can get these projects moved in such a way that these facilities would be available and ready for the summer events, because that's when they are really used. I know one year we were planning to upgrade the Perkins tennis courts, and that just took too long, and the season had already started. So if we could move these projects along, I know weather permitting, but still, it would be nice to have things ready for summer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Steve, were any of these items, were they of a size that they would have been in the capital budget presentation?
Yes, many of them would be in the capital
Okay.
budget. Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, do I have a motion for consent?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Okay, very good. Next is an ordinance authoring the issuance and sale of notes in a maximum principal amount of $8 million in anticipation of the issuance of bonds to pay the cost of constructing, reconstructing, and otherwise improving certain streets in the city and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the largest piece of the $12.4 million, and this is for street, bridge, and transportation projects.
Okay. Questions or comments?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
it's my understanding from reading the legislation, it does not include the new levy dollars. Is this part of the 27%, Mr. Fricker?
This is the debt portion of a wide variety of different street projects. So it's ultimately debt that is paid back with income tax dollars, but it's really not associated, right? It's not associated with the issue for levy, I think, if that's what you're asking.
Right, and the dollars are going to come from?
Right, from, the majority are the capital portion of the 2% income tax. So the 27%, as you said.
Oh, okay, that's what I was asking. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Do we have a motion on the floor?
Motion for consent agenda.
So second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Very good. We'll move on to our next item. This is an ordinance authorizing the issuance and sale of notes in a maximum principal amount of $750,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds to pay the cost of certain economic development projects in the city and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the final piece of the $12.4 million, and this is for economic development projects.
Okay. Questions or comments from the committee?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Fricker. I know that we'll get a list of this, but are there any that are particularly, big, notable items that you can share with us now in this?
The most notable here are costs for the Firestone Business Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments, please? Okay, I would entertain a motion for consent.
So
So-
move.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Ordinance number 8, amending ordinance number 83-2020 passed March 20th of 2020. And ordinance number 312-2020 passed October 26, 2020, which established the annual appropriation for current expenses, other expenditures, and capital outlays of the city for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is our final appropriation amendment. This year, we only did 2 amendments. Typically, we like to do 3, but just due to, the workload that everyone's had in COVID, we kind of compressed these into 2 separate ordinances. I distributed a memo earlier this afternoon that was prepared by our audit and budget manager. And I'll kind of go through a few of the highlights of that. But if anyone wants to refer to kind of the specific areas, the memo gives a little bit of detail on the various adjustments that we're making to the various city funds. The primary areas that we're addressing here are the dollars impacted by the CARES Act funding that we received. So the first page of the ordinance, we are going to reduce the general fund dollars related to our public safety costs and then transfer those costs over to the CARES Act funding. And we established 2 different funds for the CARES Act dollars that we receive. So we are not reducing in any way our costs and our service levels associated with public safety. We're simply moving those costs over, because they are eligible costs under the CARES Act, over to those CARES Act funds. So that, I know that it looks like there's a large reduction in the general fund related to those costs, but really those are just being moved over to the CARES Act fund. So I want to make everyone aware of that. And then there's a variety of different adjustments that we are making to various funds. As we often say when we present these ordinances, these are really about getting the dollars in the right area according to how the spending plan went throughout 2020. So we're kind of moving dollars into the right places. There's one other area that is a large area that's being adjusted under this is our streets fund. So we did have a number of projects that were kind of hitting at the same time this year. And a big area there was the Roaming Road project, some costs from the Main Street project, West Exchange. So we had a number of street projects that were going on that we needed some additional budget for. And so those are accounted for in this budget amendment. With that, I'd be happy to answer any specific questions. And again, I did send a memo out earlier that outlines a lot of the summaries within each fund of the adjustments that we're making.
Steve, the monies that we used out of the CARES Act when it came to safety, is that just savings to us as being able to use those CARES CARES Act dollars?
It is. So safety labor costs were declared to be eligible costs under the CARES Act. So, the costs that we typically would incur in the general fund are being transferred over and using those dollars that we received as part of the CARES Act. And that was put in place, for cities, like Akron and all cities really throughout the country, to be able to continue to fund their safety forces. We were all going to experience revenue declines, and those costs were declared eligible so that cities would not have to lay off or reduce service levels in public safety. So because those are eligible costs, those are the costs that we're going to transfer over into that CARES Act fund.
Okay, very good. Mr. Malik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Mr. Fricker. I think two questions. The first is, I think in section 2 of the ordinance, there's a transfer to service and other of almost 6 million. And I think in the memo that's reflected as advances for airport off-street parking and golf, if I'm reading that right. Can you go into that a little bit?
And motor equipment for that matter.
Okay.
So we have, we did, largely due to COVID, we did have some of our enterprise funds that, did not bring in the revenues that we typically would expect. And so these transfers are designed to get funding into those funds that did not receive the revenues that they typically do. So those are, golf, we've always subsidized that to some degree, and this is really pretty similar levels to what we've done. Some of these will be done in the form of an advance, whereas you give that fund the money, and then that fund will pay the general fund back. Some of them will be done as pure subsidy. So that's a determination that we will make, as we get closer to year end.
Okay, I guess just a follow up with regard to, I guess, I'm sure that I know there's a bunch of different categories there, but I guess the airport and golf, the revenue, I understand why that would decrease, but the expenditures also likely decrease as well, right?
But we had previously advanced to some of those funds as well. So we did have, some reduction in costs in those areas. To some degree, we're building some flexibility in here in order to be able to cover, because we're not quite through with year end yet. So, we want to know what the final cost will be. And so we're building a little bit of buffer into this appropriation amendments to cover those amounts.
Thank you, sir. I guess the only other question, I appreciate you sending the memo, and I think we're all going to go through that. But with that being the case, would it be okay if we took time and passed this next?
Understood. Yes. Yeah. That is our intention, is to to put this on consent for next week.
Sure.
We will generally, anytime we have appropriations before us, we take at least a week just for everyone to take a look. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I would be looking for a motion for consent then.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second for consent. All in favor? Aye.
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 Very good. Okay, and finally, we have a resolution expressing oppositions to State Bill 352 in consideration by the Ohio Senate, which would fundamentally shift income tax collections in Ohio and devastate city budgets across the state, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Shelley Goodrich, our Deputy Director of Finance, and Tamika Rose from the Mayor's Office are going to present on this piece.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. So thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. This is a resolution expressing our opposition to Senate Bill 352. At the beginning of the pandemic, the state legislature passed House Bill 197, which essentially stated that employers should continue to withhold for the employee's workplace location. So this allowed us to continue to collect those employee withholding dollars for employees that are temporarily working from home. And now this has been introduced in the state legislature, and it would take that away. So this would dramatically affect our income tax revenues. We have been down this year, but not as drastically as we had predicted at the beginning of the pandemic. But this would be absolutely catastrophic to us if this were to go through. This would be essentially be shifting the tax dollars of those employees to their temporary workplace location, which for many people would be their homes. The pandemic, is it's still ongoing. We hope that many of these employees are just temporarily at home. But this would be a lot of work, not only for the city to continue to administer the taxes, as well as for employers to have to withhold for all their employees' workplace locations. So this is something where we are definitely monitoring at the state level, and we would be, it would be wise for this council to express to the state legislature how this would dramatically and catastrophically affect the city of Akron going forward if this were to be passed.
We have any way of
I can take any questions that you guys may have.
Do we have any way of estimating what the cost would be to a city like Akron if the legislature were to pass this?
We have rough estimates. I think, Steve, before we had discussed about 66% of our employee withholding dollars are from people that are not living in the city of Akron. We don't really have numbers of that amount who are actually working from home. We don't have any kind of statistics on, that 66%, how much are still reporting to a workplace location in Akron and how many are currently working from their home that's not located in the city of Akron. So it is hard to kind of come up with we can certainly estimate, but it's a hard thing because we don't know who is not working currently, like First Energy, who's working from home and who's working in the office. Right now, they're withholding for everyone for the city of Akron because that's the workplace location. But Senate Bill 352 would actually allow the employer to withhold. They would have to withhold for all of their employees, their locations. So some would be in townships, other cities, and then some, would be located within the city of Akron. So it's putting a hard burden on the employer, as well as eroding the city of Akron's finances. So
I'm just curious, is Ohio Municipal League, are they leading any kind of charge here that we know of?
Tamika, can you speak to that?
So the Ohio Municipal League and the Ohio Mayor's Alliance is leading an effort in Columbus opposing this legislation, and they've asked us to pass resolutions of this nature.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Other comments, questions?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Malik.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ms. Rose, and thank you, Ms. Goodrich. I think this proposal at the state level shows how out of touch the state legislature is with regard to our major cities, and really any kind of city, I think, truthfully. And obviously this would devastate us. And I think that if there are any additional ways that this council can assist in pushing back against this, whether it's testimony or other things, I'm sure that we'd be willing to do so.
Who I'm curious, who was what legislator this was born with? Who was the legislator? Say again.
Rogner.
Okay.
Christina Rogner.
From Hudson?
Yes. Yes.
What, Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
I guess what I'm curious about, Akron is one of the largest cities in the state of Ohio. So if your major cities are devastated by something like this, what advantage would the state have in doing something as crazy as this?
We've asked ourselves, Councilwoman Amobian, we've asked ourselves the same question. We don't know.
Yes, I mean, and there would be a lot of places where this would be shifting money from the urban centers out to the suburban areas, which also is in the resolution, you know, that the distribution of wealth, you know, it would not be good. So it would be taking money away from the urban core and shifting out into the suburbs or townships where there is no taxing authority.
Yeah, I guess this goes back to that, you know, the complaint that a lot of people have is that when you have people working for the city, living outside of the city, this is where it really devastates us if something like this were to pass.
Well, and I will say most of our city workers are still located in the city of Akron. They're still coming to work, you know, and so this is really for employees that are working from home. And luckily, we've been very, very good at returning most of our employees back to the workplace location within the city of Akron, the city workers. But as we know, some of our large corporations within the city of Akron, they have temporarily dispatched their workforce to their homes.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I can see that Councilman Fusco also has his hand raised.
Mr. Fusco.
Yes, thank you. So I think you touched on it, Shelley, in terms of what that would look like, especially with the villages and townships. So if there isn't a tax, obviously within those areas, because I believe it's left to the incorporated areas, therefore that would increase the income, obviously, for those that pay, correct?
Correct. So if I lived in Bath Township where there is no taxing authority and I'm working out of my home there and my employer is withholding tax for the city of Akron because I used to come to the city of Akron to work, that person will get all of their tax dollars back and they will not have to pay anyone. So they won't have to pay the township because the township does not tax their residents. So, you know, there will be a distribution of wealth to those areas.
Yeah, I would submit that this evening someone would make a motion that this is council as a whole, mayor and council as a whole. Obviously, this would devastate our budgets. So thank you for bringing this forward.
Thank you very much. And I will have, you guys can email me more questions if you have them before tonight or even after tonight.
And I'm just, Tamika or Shelley, I'm just curious, you know, our big 4 or 5 employers, Summa, Cleveland Clinic, Goodyear, Children's, I know I'm missing some, do they look at chiming in on something like this with the legislature? Because everybody that I've mentioned, you know, their buildings are in the city of Akron, and the city of Akron loses a massive amount of income tax like this. You know, it affects the street that leads up to their front door. And I'm just wondering if any of those businesses are thinking about chiming in with the legislature about this.
Well, I know that Mayor Horgan has talked to the Greater Akron Chamber about this, and those businesses are a member of that, and they have had calls around intel around this, how it would have impacted the city and the state budget as well. But I don't know where Summa and Cleveland Clinic are. I do know that some of the larger businesses in Ohio have chosen to stay quiet and not take a position. I really can't say. Mayor Horgan, I don't know if you've heard anything about the businesses.
Yeah, I've talked to all or most of the big, if not all of them. There's a concerted effort within all of the cities to not have this legislation pass of its devastating effects. And you can't even really quantify it. It would also affect our agreements in our jet arrangements too. And it's difficult to pinpoint an exact number just because of the available data that is out there. But there is a concerted effort in and around all of the chambers, all of the obviously the Ohio Mayor's Alliance, the Ohio Municipal League, into lobbying to not have this go forward. And into Councilwoman Amobian's question earlier, you know, it's a fundamental issue of fairness that they have tried to let people know it's not fair that they're being taxed or not, they're not working there. And it goes back to it's a strong equity issue of an anti-city bias in Columbus and the state legislature to do what they can to not help cities and to maybe even hurt them. And so I know on all of the efforts that we've had with the state legislature and the governor's office, who is not supportive of it, if I can remember correctly, that there's a concerted effort to not have this pass. But COVID is temporary, at least knock on wood, we hope it is. And we think things will return where people will come back down to these major urban centers and they will need services like cities provide. And so we're using all of our efforts to make sure that this doesn't go forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, I can see that Councilman Neal has his hand raised.
Yes, Councilman Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to speak to this matter and really use it as an opportunity to encourage members of council to be engaged with our municipal league. Many of you remember last year we had the executive director, Kent Scarrett, come to council chambers to speak to us about the benefits of our relationship with the Ohio Municipal League, because there was a move to discontinue our membership. But it's issues like this that are critical. It's one thing for Akron to speak, but it's another thing when we are at the table negotiating with other legislators from across the state that are on the local level, because this gives us a strong voice in our state government. This here, COVID-19 has given us a glimpse of a shift, a paradigm shift that is coming. The way we govern is going to change. The way we tax is going to change. And so I encourage us to be a part, as members, to get engaged. We have a membership, get engaged with the Municipal League. They threw out an invitation to us about a year ago and asking us to be at the table to help form what is an urban agenda. Now that has a double meaning. One is to help be a part of an urban agenda for cities, but also to be a part of creating a Black agenda for cities. And I say all that because issues like this are what's being discussed. We're talking about everything that we're talking about, from reimagining public safety to institutional and structural racism. But this tax issue is one that's being discussed. We're even, thankfully, our state legislature is looking back at the school funding, but this is another one. And if what many cities are finding, if you're looking, companies are reassessing. Do they need all that overhead with office space? And so we will, I'm sure, dodge this bullet this time, but trust me, it's going to come back before us. That's why it's critical for us to have an understanding on how financing works on the municipal level and how it's connected to state government and federal. So I just want to encourage, we have these memberships. They offer us training and courses to help educate us, because when you go to these meetings, you'll find that the old way of taxing cities, taxing folks is being maxed out, and we have to find other ways on how to provide the services and deal with the changes that are coming. And COVID has accelerated that. So I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to encourage us to lean into the membership with the Municipal League so that we could be a part of those discussions and lead in some of those discussions. So I have found it a great benefit to be at the table and to work with the executive director and other legislators from across the state. And of course, we know that we're members of NLC, and we get a chance to see where some cities are a little bit further. So just wanted to use this opportunity to say, I support the resolution, but the reality of it is that change is coming.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Neal. Thank you. Those are good thoughts. Any other hands I cannot see?
Sure. Mr. Chair, I can see that Tamika Rose has her hand raised.
Yes, Tamika, please.
Chairman Freeman and members of council, of the committee, I wanted to just reiterate that the Ohio Mayor's Alliance has been really taking the charge on this, and that the Ohio Municipal League is sitting in on our cause. So the Ohio Mayor's Alliance is really pushing for this and lobbying against this with everyone down in Columbus. And we are also very well in tune, and the mayor is on call with the seven big cities twice a week, if not more, and is very in tune of what's going on in Columbus.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Other comments or questions? Am I missing anything, Sarah?
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Would probably be looking then for a motion to suspend the rules.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules. All in favor, please let it be known by signifying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, very good. We will get that passed out this evening. I believe that was our last piece. And with that, we will call the meeting to be adjourned at 3:42. Thank you, each and every one.
Thanks, everyone. That's our final committee meeting of the day.